Let me tell you, if you ever find yourself assembling a cheap, mail-order gas grill on a sweltering Saturday afternoon in suburban America, you are already having a terrible, no-good, very bad day. It's like the universe is saying, "Hey pal, you think you're going to enjoy a perfectly grilled medium-rare steak tonight? LOL, think again." I was on my 10th curse word, squinting at the diagram that looked less like instructions and more like an abstract charcoal drawing, when the shadow fell over me. A crisp, perfectly ironed shadow, smelling faintly of expensive lavender and righteous indignation. "Mr. Davis." I didn't even look up. I knew that voice. It had the tone of a librarian telling you the Dewey Decimal System was about to sue you for slander. "Karen," I grunted, wrestling a metal shelf labeled Part F that clearly did not fit into the slot labeled Part G. To what do I owe the distinct pleasure of being interrupted while losing the war against backyard assembly? Karen didn't do small talk, especially not my brand of sarcasm. She was wearing a crisp white linen outfit that looked suspiciously like she'd purchased it just moments before, presumably to protect it from the filth of the world. She carried a clipboard. Of course, she carried a clipboard. And she pointed, not at the assembly manual, but at my beautiful, towering maple tree. It had been there since before she moved into the neighborhood and started renaming the street lamps. "We need to address the matter of the arboreal debris," she stated, her face set in a tight mask of suburban distress. Arboreal debris. Seriously? "Are you talking about leaves?" I asked, finally standing up and wiping greasy sweat on my ancient, perfectly respectable Led Zeppelin t-shirt. "Because, Karen, that's what trees do. It's their whole thing. It's literally their primary function, besides providing the oxygen you're currently using to criticize them." She tisk-tisked, a noise so sharp it could cut glass. "I am referring specifically to the excessive, negligent, and frankly hostile defoliation of your Aether rubrum onto my property. Specifically, onto the Pristine Machine." The Pristine Machine, in case you haven't guessed, was her 3-year-old obsidian black SUV, which she washed twice a day, even in the rain, and probably tucked into a velvet blanket at night. It was the only thing she loved more than telling people what to do. Hostile defoliation? I couldn't help but chuckle. "Karen, it's not a trebuchet. It's a tree. It drops leaves. They decompose. It's called nature. Maybe you've heard of her? She's a messy lady." Her eyes narrowed, and I knew I had crossed the line from light-hearted mockery to full-blown existential threat. "This is not a joke, Mr. Davis. I spent $400 last week on a professional sealant and paint correction, and since then I have counted by my own careful ledger." She consulted the dreaded clipboard, which was apparently an expense report for Mother Nature's crimes. 20 sushi, 6 maple leaves, 12 small twigs, and 1 unidentified berry that has left a sticky residue the size of a dime directly beneath the windshield wiper of my vehicle. The cost of detailing and the prophylactic application of a protective tarp, which I now have to purchase, will be forwarded to you, effective immediately. I stared at her. $400. For leaves. Leaves that would be replaced by an entirely new batch of leaves next year. My blood pressure was climbing faster than my sarcasm level. "So, you want me to pay you $400 because my perfectly healthy tree did what trees do?" I said, trying to keep my voice even, but it was cracking under the sheer weight of the audacity. "No," she corrected, with infuriating calm. "I want you to pay the $400, and I demand you take immediate action to either drastically trim or, ideally, remove the offending specimen entirely. It is a known nuisance. Remove the tree, my tree. The one that gave me shade, character, and a small degree of moral high ground in a passive-aggressive suburban war. It was the last straw. The idea was so monumentally absurd, so deeply disconnected from reality, that it triggered a dark, beautiful switch in my brain. The switch labeled, "Go nuclear." "You know what, Karen?" I said, dropping Part F and letting it clatter onto the driveway. "That's a brilliant idea. You are absolutely right. The leaves are a menace. I need to take action. I need to ensure that not one single, solitary speck of arboreal debris ever falls onto your precious, pristine machine again." She looked genuinely smug, like she'd just won the Nobel Prize for neighborly tyranny. "I appreciate you finally seeing reason, Mr. Davis." She had no idea. Absolutely none. My inner monologue was already calculating the square footage of the maple. "You want protection from nature? Fine. You'll get protection. The most excessive, absurd, and entirely unnecessary protection money can buy." I just smiled. A wide, slightly unhinged smile. "Oh, I see reason, Karen. Loud and clear. You just wait and see my solution." With that, she retreated, her linen skirt barely rustling, convinced she had won. I, however, had just declared war. A petty, ridiculous, incredibly expensive, and utterly hilarious war. My little grill assembly was forgotten. This was now my mission. I was going to secure that tree from any and all natural processes, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. The first step, naturally, was to research the most effective method of leaf containment. My initial searches were a comedy in themselves. How to stop leaves from falling. Tree prophylactic. And is it illegal to wrap your neighbor's car in bubble wrap? Just checking my options, okay? I found plenty of information about netting, trimming, and composting, but nothing about securing an entire, living, 3-story maple tree into a giant suburban cryo chamber. My first attempts at minor retaliation were, I admit, pathetic, but necessary to set the stage. I started aiming my sprinkler, not directly at her car, because that would be too obvious and possibly illegal, but just close enough to her prize-winning, unnaturally vibrant petunias that she'd have to dash out in the morning to adjust her lawn gnome. Her response was immediate. A passive-aggressive, "No trespassing" sign, hammered into the ground on the inside of her property line, facing my yard. Like I was going to be tempted to sneak over at 3 a.m. and steal a bag of her pristine, store-bought dirt. The message was clear. The leaf wars were entering phase 2. Mutually assured annoyance. The absurdity was building, and I had to tell someone. I called my friend Mark, an urban planner who already thought my life was a sitcom pilot waiting to happen. "Mark, you won't believe it," I began, pacing my kitchen floor. "Did Karen buy a peacock?" he asked instantly. "Worse. She demanded I cut down the maple because 26 leaves dared to touch her SUV. And now I'm going to pay her $400 and remove the tree, according to her." "Dude, don't pay her. Just buy a leaf blower and point it at her house for an hour," Mark suggested. No. I told her I have a solution. A better solution. A final solution," I said. And the idea, which had been a whisper, became a glorious, full-throated shout. "I'm going to wrap the entire tree in industrial-grade plastic wrap, like a giant suburban Jell-O mold." There was silence on the line, followed by a wheezing sound. "You are going to gift wrap a living tree?" Mark finally managed, half choking on laughter. "That's not petty, man. That's art. You have to do it. You absolutely have to do it." "I know. It's the only way to genuinely prevent arboreal debris. It's airtight. It's non-toxic. It's expensive. It's pointless. It's perfect." I was practically buzzing with the manic energy of a man who just found his life's true purpose: spite. "It'll cost you $5,000, you know," Mark warned, but he was still laughing. "It's not about the money, Mark. It's about sending a message. That message is, your petty tyranny has met its match in my slightly richer, much more ridiculous petty tyranny." The pivotal decision was made. Now came the hard part: finding a crew of professionals who would take on the job. I started with the serious companies. I called Arbor Tech Tree Services. A guy named Dave answered, sounding like he'd been doing honest tree work since the Eisenhower administration. "Yeah, Arbor Tech, what can we do for you?" "Hi, Dave. I have a mature maple tree, and I need a quote to encase it in a protective polymer film, like industrial plastic, wrap, top to bottom." A beat of silence. I heard him spit, probably tobacco, into the dirt. "You want us to wrap the tree in Saran wrap?" "Industrial grade, the kind you use for pallet shipping. It needs to be totally sealed. No leaf escapes, Dave. None." "Son, that's illegal, I think. You'd kill the tree. Trees gotta breathe. They do the whole photosynthesis thing. Plus, my crew is trained in trimming and removal, not turning a perfectly good maple into a giant, sweaty insect trap. I can quote you on a full removal, though. $3,500 will take the whole nuisance out." "No, absolutely not. I need the tree. I just need it to stop being a tree in a way that allows leaves to fall," I insisted. "Look, I'm gonna politely refuse. You got a nice day now." Click. Fail. Serious arborists, it turns out, have scruples. Who knew? Next, I went to the dark side of the internet. I started searching for scaffolding rentals, industrial wrapping services, and ridiculous art installation labor. That's how I found Sal's special projects and event staging. His website was a poorly coded monstrosity featuring photos of bizarre wedding props, maybe a low-budget movie set, and an outdoor display that involved a giant inflatable octopus. "Perfect," I called the number. A gruff voice picked up. "Sal's, what ridiculous thing you want to build?" "I need to wrap a mature maple tree in industrial plastic wrap, about 35 feet tall, entirely sealed. I need scaffolding, a crane, and a crew that will do this without asking too many uncomfortable questions about my sanity." Another pause, but this one sounded less like confusion and more like a guy doing quick math in his head. Cha-ching. "A tree, huh? Like a big green marshmallow?" The guy, who I correctly assumed was Sal, mused. "Look, usually we're building pop-up bars or trying to make it snow on a soundstage in July. We don't typically handle botanical packaging. But you got the cash to make it worth the trouble?" "Name your price for the absurdity, Sal. This is about principle, not budget." Principle. I like that. Principle pays extra. For the crane rental, the specialized high-tension wrapping gear, 300 rolls of stretch film, and the liability waiver for when your neighbors call the police. "Let's call it $8,000, Sal stated, the number rolling off his tongue like he was selling a slightly used yacht. My heart did a quick stutter step. $8,000. To win a fight about a few leaves. It was more than I paid for my last vacation. $8,000, I repeated slowly. That's a lot of plastic. Yeah, well, we usually build decks, not giant prophylactic trees. But for that kind of dough, we'll wrap the moon. Cash up front for materials, the rest upon final seal. Do we have a deal, Mr. Davis? And yes, Sal, we have a deal. When can you start the leaf drop mitigation project? Tomorrow morning. Don't worry about the logistics. We'll show up. Just make sure the cops know you're not trying to steal the thing. Success. The deal was done. I hung up the phone feeling the exhilaration of a man who'd just signed a contract with a mercenary army to fight a war over a pebble. This was going to be the most ridiculous, satisfying $8,000 I'd ever spent. Karen was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous neighbor is the one who takes your petty demand literally. The next morning, the street was introduced to Sal's special projects in the most spectacular way possible. A flatbed truck carrying a small crane, a utility vehicle overflowing with aluminum scaffolding poles, and a U-Haul trailer packed solid with what looked like a lifetime supply of industrial cling film. The collective sound of every curtain on the street being peeled back to peer out was deafening. Karen's, naturally, was the first. My part of the deal was logistics, and that meant the dreaded City Hall. I had to secure the necessary paperwork to avoid an immediate cease and desist order before the first roll of wrap was even deployed. I walked into the planning and zoning department, a gray cube of existential dread, and took a number. When my number was called, I approached a desk manned by a woman named Brenda. Brenda looked like she'd witnessed every ridiculous suburban drama since the invention of the HOA, and she was immune to shock. "How can I help you?" she asked, not looking up from her monitor. "Yes, I need to apply for a tree modification permit, specifically a permit for temporary polymer encasement of a deciduous specimen," I explained, using the jargon Sal had jokingly thrown out. Brenda paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She looked up slowly, her expression entirely blank, as if I'd just asked for a map to Narnia. "Sir, we have permits for removal, trimming and hazard mitigation. Temporary polymer encasement. That's new." "Well, it's for hazard mitigation," I insisted, leaning in conspiratorially. "Mitigating the hazard of leaves dropping onto a neighbor's car. It's a temporary measure. Think of it as a very aggressive, full-body rain slicker for the tree. It doesn't hurt the tree. It just contains its droppings." Brenda pursed her lips. "Is it a protected tree?" "No, just a highly productive one." My internal monologue was screaming, how do you ask a city official for permission to turn a tree into a giant, suburban Jell-O mold? I just kept my face straight. She flipped through a thick binder of laminated rules. Section 4.12, subsection B states, "Any non-permanent structure erected on private property must not impede public thoroughfare or present a visible hazard." I suppose, if it's secured, it's not strictly forbidden. I'll stamp this as a temporary construction enclosure for now. That'll be $75 for the permit and a $10 surcharge for unspecified novelty structure. I paid the $75 plus the novelty fee, which was honestly a bargain. I had the official City of Redacted stamp of approval to proceed with my absurd act of passive aggression. Meanwhile, back on the street, Sal and his crew, Spike and Manny, were assembling the scaffolding. It was a metal lattice rising around my maple, dwarfing the house. The noise was substantial, clanging pipes and the intermittent roar of the crane engine. Karen, of course, was already on the phone. The result of her call arrived 45 minutes later. A sleek black and white patrol car, lights flashing mutely, pulling up to the curb. Out stepped Officer Miller, a young, earnest-looking guy who clearly got stuck with the neighbor dispute calls. He looked up at the scaffolding, then at the U-Haul of plastic wrap, then at the official city permit I was clutching like the Declaration of Independence. Karen emerged instantly, power walking over, her clipboard now replaced by an aggressively laminated printout of some HOA bylaw that didn't apply to my house. "Officer, thank heavens! This man is committing vandalism. He's putting up an unauthorized structure. He's using heavy machinery and making a terrible disturbance, she cried, pointing a trembling finger at the tree. Officer Miller held up a hand to Karen, then turned to me. Sir, I'm getting calls about construction, and frankly, a visual spectacle. Can you explain what's going on here? I produced the laminated permit with a flourish. Officer, good morning. I assure you I am in full compliance. I have a valid temporary construction enclosure permit from Planning and Zoning. As you can see, I am engaged in a necessary process of leaf drop mitigation. My neighbor, Ms. Peterson, was concerned about my tree's natural tendency to drop leaves onto her vehicle. As a good neighbor, and in a proactive effort to prevent any future arboreal debris issues, I have hired this licensed crew to fully encase the tree in a protective, non-permeable polymer sheath. Officer Miller slowly read the permit, squinting at the unspecified novelty structure fee. He looked up at the tree, back at Karen, who was sputtering, and then at me. So, you're wrapping the tree in plastic wrap to stop the leaves from falling on her car? He asked, trying desperately to keep his face neutral, but I could see the twitch at the corner of his mouth. Precisely, I confirmed. No law is being broken. I'm simply mitigating a nuisance as prescribed by local ordinance. The leaves are technically not dropping if they are encased in a protective polymer film. In fact, I'm solving a neighbor dispute through highly creative yet technically legal means. Karen practically shrieked. It's ridiculous! It's an eyesore! It's a monument to spite! Ma'am, ridiculing a neighbor's landscaping choice is not a crime, Officer Miller said, his voice finally betraying a hint of wry amusement. He handed my permit back. Mr. Davis, you're clear on the structure. However, and here came the inevitable caveat, I have to issue a noise warning. The operation of the crane is in violation of the 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. window for heavy machinery. You'll have to wait until 10 o'clock to start that part. Understood, officer. Thank you for your diligence, I replied, genuinely respectful. The cop left with a visible shake of his head, and, I swear, a brief, suppressed laugh. He ultimately confirmed no law was being broken, just the noise ordinance, giving me 1 more hour of delay. The delay, however, gave Karen time to set up her counteroffensive. She didn't call the police again. She did something worse. She brought out a folding chair, a sun hat, and a thermos, and sat on her lawn, directly facing my house. She was going to monitor the operation. It was a silent, judgmental protest, and it was glorious. I spent the next hour talking to Sal and Spike. Your neighbor is a piece of work, Sal commented, tightening a bolt on the scaffolding. She's the reason this job exists, Sal. Show some respect, I quipped. Right. Well, we call this the passive-aggressive canopy enclosure. We'll use the heat gun gently to seal the seams. We don't want any, oxygen getting in there to encourage those leaves to drop, do we? Sal winked. As the noise window opened at 10 a.m., the crane began to move. The crew started hauling the enormous spools of plastic wrap up the scaffolding. My moment of triumph was close. I looked at the vast, shimmering rolls of material, and then at Karen, sitting there in her self-appointed sentry post. Was I crazy? Yes. Was this worth $8,000? Absolutely. As the sun dipped, the stage was set. The scaffolding was complete. The massive rolls of stretch film were waiting. The tree, silhouetted against the evening sky, looked like a prisoner awaiting a ludicrous execution. I felt a fleeting moment of self-doubt. My bank account was now critically low. But then I looked across the street. Karen was still there, a silhouette of petty judgment. No retreat. No surrender. Tomorrow, I muttered to the tree. Tomorrow, you get a new coat. The crew promised an early start. I went inside and set my alarm, my heart pounding with anticipation. The great tree encasement was imminent. The stage was set for the climax. I didn't need the alarm. I was awake at 5:30 a.m., buzzing with a mixture of anxiety and giddy anticipation, like a kid on Christmas morning who knew he was about to open a box containing a slightly dangerous, yet hilarious contraption. By 7 o'clock a.m., the lights of Sal's Special Projects vans were illuminating my front yard. They moved with the focused efficiency of people performing a task that was entirely new and extremely well paid. They weren't wrapping a tree. They were sealing a time capsule of petty vengeance. The spectacle began in earnest when the crew started deploying the wrap. Using a combination of the crane's extended arm and the scaffolding for manual support, they began to spiral the massive clear film around the trunk. The noise was surprisingly minimal at first, just the whirring of the crane and the rustle of plastic, but the sight was astonishing. It looked like my maple tree was being slowly mummified by a crew of absurdly practical aliens. By 8:30 a.m., the base of the tree was a solid, shimmering cylinder. The trunk was sealed. Now came the difficult part: the canopy. This required the crew to climb the scaffolding and manually secure the wrap, creating a massive, irregular dome that captured every branch, every twig, and every single potential leaf dropper. The noise of the operation, now amplified by the work high above, had achieved its goal. It attracted an audience. Neighbors started to gather. Mrs. Gable, who usually only spoke to complain about the humidity, was out with her dog, jaw practically on the pavement. Two guys from 2 streets over, Kevin and Steve, had pulled up folding chairs and were filming the whole thing on their phones. Someone had even brought a coffee thermos. My leaf drop mitigation project had become community theater. Sal, the crew leader, was directing the operation from the ground, shouting instructions that were hilariously over the top. He wore a high-vis vest and a look of deep concentration. Alpha Team, initiate polymer deployment on the secondary canopy layer. Keep the tension stable. Watch for wind shear on the WHDD Dwelser factor, he bellowed into a walkie-talkie. WHD factor, I thought. What the hell is a WWDD Dweller factor? Probably just the wacky degree of the project. I watched from my porch, sipping a truly necessary cup of coffee, feeling like the eccentric, slightly villainous mastermind in a movie. Then, the true villain appeared. Karen emerged from her front door. She wasn't wearing linen this time. She was in what I can only describe as a power suit of beige anger. She didn't walk. She marched. She surveyed the scene, the crane, the scaffolding, the crowd, and her nemesis, my tree, now half encased in plastic. This was it, Karen's final attack. She marched straight toward me, past the neighbors and the crew. Sal, seeing the impending confrontation, paused the wrapping operation on the primary branches. Silence descended, broken only by the slight metallic creak of the crane. You are insane, Mr. Davis, she stated, her voice tight with controlled fury. Am I, Karen? I asked, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. I thought I was just following instructions. You demanded I take immediate action to ensure no leaves ever touch your car again, citing the necessity of costly detailing. Well, here we are. This is a 5-layer high-density polymer barrier secured by state-of-the-art scaffolding. This is the ultimate preventative measure. Think of the money you'll save on detailing. It's an eyesore, she hissed. It's a monstrosity. It's driving down property values. No, Karen, an eyesore is demanding your neighbor cut down a healthy tree because of natural biodegradable material. This, I gestured grandly at the massive, shimmering, bizarre structure, is a monument to spite. And I paid $8,000 for it, so you can bet I'm leaving it up until spring. It's an art installation, really. We should give it a name. The Davis Containment Unit, perhaps. You are deliberately trying to antagonize me. This is targeted harassment. I am deliberately trying to be a good neighbor and prevent future leaf drop incidents, ma'am, I replied, putting on my most innocent customer service smile. No need to thank me. I just want you to feel secure that your pristine machine is safe. From leaves, guaranteed. She threw her hands up in exasperation. The humidity! The condensation! That much trapped moisture will certainly cause damage. It'll rust the undercarriage. It'll create mold in the soil. I'm calling the city again. I'm calling a lawyer. I didn't flinch. Be my guest. I have a permit that says temporary construction enclosure, and my contractor has an ironclad liability waiver. I also have 20 witnesses who heard you declare the tree a known nuisance. I am simply mitigating the nuisance. Do you have documentation that specifically forbids wrapping an existing, non-protected tree in industrial film? She sputtered, defeated by the logic of her own absurd starting position. She could argue about the aesthetics, but she couldn't argue with the fact. The leaves were contained. The tree had been removed from the ecosystem. Sal, seeing the confrontation reach its peak, called out, "All right, gentlemen, let's seal the deal. Final layer, secondary canopy." The crew, having enjoyed the show, roared their assent and cranked the wrapping into high gear. This was the climax. They swaddled the remaining branches, moving with efficiency until the entire maple tree was transformed. It was huge. It was shiny. It was completely, utterly sealed. It looked like a gigantic, ghostly lollipop, or maybe a massive alien egg. It was magnificent. The final layer was applied. Sal hit the heat gun, sealing the last seam with a satisfying hiss. The wrapping stopped. The crane fell silent. The crowd burst into a mix of applause and bewildered chuckles. Kevin and Steve started filming the plastic tree from every angle. It was finished. Karen stood there, beaten not by force, but by the sheer, unbridled power of excessive literalism. She took one long, defeated look at the shimmering, contained monster in my yard, turned on her heel, and retreated into her house, slamming the door. The battle was won. I had achieved true leaf drop mitigation. The crowd dispersed quickly, armed with their smartphone footage and a great story to tell at the next neighborhood barbecue. Sal and his crew, high-fiving, started the tedious process of dismantling the scaffolding. "Another satisfied client," Sal said, wiping his brow as he approached me for final payment. "Look, I gotta say, in 20 years of staging, that's the silliest damn thing I've ever built. And I once built a rotating cake stand shaped like a Viking helmet." I handed him the check, the large number causing my hand to tremble slightly. "The price of peace, Sal. The price of peace. The tree is contained. The leaves are mitigated. Do I get a warranty against tearing?" "Against leaves? Yeah. Against neighborhood teenagers with sharp keys? That's extra," he grinned. "We're out. Good luck with the... whatever this is." With the crew gone and the crane lumbering away, the street settled back into a fragile, artificial calm. All that remained was my house, my normal, suburban house, next to a huge, shimmering, plastic-wrapped behemoth of a tree. It was serene, ridiculous, and undeniably final. The peace was immediate, if strange. Karen never came out. She didn't call the police again. She didn't even bring her car out of the garage. The sheer absurdity of the physical reality, the huge, undeniable $8,000 plastic-wrapped victory, had broken her spirit. She had no counter-argument. She couldn't argue against a physical structure that literally prevented the only thing she had complained about. I sat on my porch that evening, enjoying the eerie light cast by the street lamp reflecting off the plastic. The tree was fine. I'd consulted with Sal about airflow before the seal, and he assured me the industrial wrap had been applied to leave microscopic gaps around the trunk base, just enough to not immediately suffocate the poor thing, but tight enough to hold every single miserable leaf. A week later, the local news ran a short, bewildered segment called "The Plastic Phenomenon of Elm Street," featuring blurry smartphone footage and a brief quote from the city clerk about the unspecified novelty structure fee. They interviewed Mrs. Gable, who said simply, "It's weird, but at least it's quiet." And Karen? She tried one last, desperate attack, delivered in the form of a formal letter slipped into my mailbox. Still no direct conversation, of course. She argued that the plastic created a greenhouse effect, causing the leaves to prematurely rot, and thereby creating a liquid, fungal nuisance that would surely be more damaging than the dry leaves ever were. I just recycled the letter. I had won. I finally started assembling that grill I'd abandoned 2 weeks ago. I wasn't just assembling a grill, though. I was assembling a philosophy. I spent a lot of money to win the stupidest fight of my life. Was it worth it? Absolutely. It wasn't about the leaves or the tree or even the $8,000, which hurt, believe me, it hurt. It was about standing your ground against unreasonable demands and doing it with style, flair, and an absurd, undeniable act of defiance. It was a physical manifestation of a snarky internal monologue. I look at that tree every day now. It's a ridiculous, shimmering trophy. It bought me peace. It also taught the entire neighborhood a valuable lesson. Be careful what you wish for, because your neighbor might be crazy enough to take your ridiculous complaint and turn it into a magnificent suburban legend. My neighbor wanted protection from nature. She got it. The tree is safe. The car is safe. And the neighborhood is slightly funnier thanks to the Davis Containment Unit. I had paid the price for true leaf drop mitigation, and frankly, I'd do it again. Now, where did I put the charcoal? I deserve a steak. A perfectly grilled leaf-free steak.